How's it going, folks? Taylor Wachowski here. In today's video, I'll be teaching a very important lesson. One that so many try very hard to accomplish, but fall short all too often. Today I'll be teaching you how to walk your dog on a loose leash. Now that could seem very challenging or very easy. It just depends. And I might sound like I'm making a much bigger deal out of this than is really necessary. But this one simple behavior could be all it takes to prevent a dog from spending the rest of their days alone in the backyard, being rehomed, or ending up at a local animal shelter. If you didn't already know, I volunteer at the local animal shelter myself, where I teach our new volunteers how to handle our dogs, and you guessed it, walk on a loose leash. I've seen it time and time again. People come in wanting a dog who knows how to sit, down, come, don't bark, don't jump on people, and walk loose on a leash. For any dog who doesn't, it might mean they're simply overlooked. But for many others that are adopted with these common behavior problems, their people might not mind using very harsh corrective tools on their dogs. They'll use any method necessary and any teacher necessary to get the job done and teach that dog to walk nicely by their side. Some of these tools will include choke chains, star collars, prong collars, shot collars. For whatever reason, the most popular combination is a prong collar and shot collar being used at the same time. For this lesson, I'm going to simply teach you how to walk your dog with a flat buckle collar and a 6-foot slip leash, and of course a few treats. If you happen to Google or ask someone how to walk a dog on a loose leash, I guarantee one of those results will show a trainer who insists on using one or more of the tools previously mentioned to teach a dog a behavior they already know how to do. A dog does not need to learn how to walk. Believe it or not, they are born with that ability. Now, I'm sure a lot of people out there are saying that a prong collar is much safer than a flat buckle collar because it provides even pressure around the throat and doesn't dig in. And I can see your point. I see where you're coming from. But to me, I don't care what anyone says. Metal around a dog's throat or face or any animal just doesn't belong. To me, there's no excuse. That's why, as humans, it is our job to teach our dogs how to walk nicely by our side, how to give in to pressure, and walk at our pace. I bet you didn't even know there's a scientific reason as to why dogs pull. So before we even start messing with our dogs, we need to understand the importance of pressure and release and the physiological nature of our canines.
When referring to pressure and release with animals, the first thing that comes to mind is usually prey animals, such as horses, cows, donkeys, sheep, goats, llamas, alpacas, and maybe even guinea pigs. However, pressure and release relates to both prey and predatory animals in the way that they react or respond to pressure. What is pressure? Well, it depends on the animal, what they perceive as pressure. This could be social or physical pressure. For a dog who doesn't like being petted or touched on their feet, this is putting pressure on them with a physical touch. For a horse who isn't used to using a bit in their mouth, and then a rough-handed rider starts yanking on the pain bit, there's physical pressure being applied on the jaw, gums, tongue, and possibly teeth as well. If you're trying to catch a stray dog, and the closer you get to them, the faster they run away, this is putting social pressure on them. The further you run behind them, you're putting pressure and moving them away from where you want them to go. Same as if you use a leash on a dog when walking. When the dog pulls into the collar, I will actually stop their feet, stopping their forward movement. At this point, the leash is going to be fairly tight. So I pull back on the dog's collar just enough to get them to take one step backward. Remember not to pull too hard or yank the dog back. Only use as much pressure as necessary. Once the dog has moved back one step, I immediately let the leash go loose. This is really important, to always let the leash go loose as soon as they move backward. The point in releasing the tension in the leash is to teach the dog to give in to pressure. If you are consistent and repeat these steps every time the leash gets tight, the dog will learn to understand that to continue walking, they need to keep the leash loose. The responsibility is also up to the person walking the dog, to make sure you are not holding the leash unnecessarily tight or taking in too much slack. The dog needs slack in the leash, otherwise you are just manhandling them and moving them around with a tight leash. The dog learns to ignore you and just follow where the leash drags them. Keep the leash loose. If you've ever walked a strong dog before, it's likely that you've asked yourself why dogs pull so much. Better yet, why do they insist on moving forward even though they're gasping and wheezing for air? Don't they realize all they have to do is stop pulling and walk at a normal pace, and that would stop the leash from digging into their throat? Well, unfortunately dogs don't have the pleasure of that type of logical thinking. Even so, it's not the dog's responsibility to think of why they do the things they do. Rather, it's the human's job to teach the dog what we want them to do. I often hear people saying, "Stupid dog, why don't they just stop pulling if they can't breathe?" If they're gonna pull, then they deserve what they get. To which I mentally reply, "Stupid human, they don't even understand how their dog thinks." Actually, there's a scientific reason as to why dogs pull, and that is called the oppositional reflex. By definition, the dog's opposition reflex is the instinctive reaction to push against a push. dogs have a natural resistance to pressure called the opposition reflex. If dogs are pulled in one direction, they will automatically pull in the other direction. The oppositional reflex is your dog's natural instinct to resist pressure. One example of oppositional reflex in your dog would be if you have your dog on a regular leash and collar and you're trying to pull them into the car. Say this dog has never been in a car before, they're a little bit frightened. The more you pull on your leash, the more it tightens around their neck, pressing on the oppositional reflex, in this case in the back of the head, at the base of the skull. The more you try to pull your dog into the car, the more they fight the pressure and move into it. Into it meaning away from you, into the pressure on the collar on the back of the neck. So they try to fight the pressure, and unknowingly pushing back into that pressure, remaining in the state of mind of fight or flight. The instant the human releases that pressure and lets the dog cool down, the dog will likely stop pulling as well. Real quick, I want to state that I understand that the original use of the flat buckle collar was intended for identification tags only, not meant to be used with a leash when walking your dog. That is why they have harnesses, some specially designed to help pullers, some for the safety of just a normal walk so your dog is not pressing into that oppositional reflex. I still use the flat buckle collar and a leash with adonis because I've taught my dog how to walk properly on one, as I would teach any dog that I work with. If you feel more comfortable using a harness, feel free to do so, but this is just how I walk with my dogs. So what is fight and flight? When your dog is hitting this oppositional reflex, they're sent into fight or flight, which is the body's reaction to danger. Specifically, if the collar around the throat tightens, then the dog feels, hey, something is trying to kill me or something is trying to hurt me. Being a predator, they generally try to fight that. When your body is in fight or flight, a lot of things go on. The blood rushes to your large muscles, allowing you to run away very quickly if you need to. You have adrenaline rush, your senses get a little bit heightened, your sense of smell gets stronger, you stop salivating, you stop digesting, your pupils dilate, you get tunnel vision, maybe your hearing is a little bit impaired or more in tune. Lots of things happen with the body to make it best for your body to get out of this situation of danger, and that happens within seconds with dogs when you're pulling on the collar, when they're pulling on the leash of the collar, and they're in this state of mind. I tend to think they're actually pretty smart because they're trying to get away from something that they feel is trying to kill them or put them in danger. Unfortunately, they cause more harm than good when they're trying to get away from this pressure, and that's why it's the human's job to teach them how to properly give in to pressure, which is also why I teach dogs to walk on a flat buckle collar, walk in a harness, walk in a head halter, walk in anything the same way. So if they ever find a new tool that is a little spooky to them and puts pressure on certain pressure points, they know how to give into pressure and stop themselves from going into that fight or flight. Other obvious reasons why dogs would pull is because it works. It gets them where they want to go. Maybe they want to go sniff a tree and they're pulling. They're in this really hyped up state and you keep moving with them. And they get to go sniff the tree. So that behavior in itself is self-rewarding. If they see a treat dropped on the ground, they pull to go get it. They have pulled and they get rewarded from the treat. So they think, oh, pulling is good. Dogs do a lot of weird things that we as humans don't really understand, but everything does happen for a reason. There's always a method to their madness, so to speak, meant to benefit them in some way, help them survive. So if people think dogs are selfish, they are predators, they do what works, they do what will keep them alive. Okay, enough talking. Let's get walking. First off, I start with Adonis on his flat buckle collar and his 6-foot leash. If you prefer to use a harness for this exercise, feel free. Just remember, if you decide to switch over to something else, you'll need to train your dog how to walk properly with your new tool too. But that's not a bad thing. Just another opportunity to bond and grow. We'll begin inside first to give you two a fighting chance against all the distractions you'll face when working outside. Start by standing with your dog on a loose leash. The best way to ensure you're keeping your leash free of any unnecessary tension is to hook it on your thumb and stick it in your pocket. Then use your free hand to slide up and down the leash to guide your dog back to you when they pull. Begin walking in one direction with purpose, not too slow, but not running either. Wait until your dog catches up to you. If they pass you, but keep the leash loose, click and reward with a tasty treat. Keep walking, then turn around and walk in the opposite direction, and see how your pup reacts. If they run ahead of you and pull on the leash, stop walking, stand still and begin to gently pull back on the leash. Your goal here is to pull back just enough to make your dog take one step backward. The instant they do, click and loosen the leash. If your dog doesn't immediately pull again, give them a treat for their efforts. If they do pull again, repeat the previous steps and try to move in a different direction and keep up this two-step dance of moving forward and backward, clicking and treating until your dog gets the idea. When you can walk anywhere in your house on a loose leash, move to the backyard. This will likely be a bit more difficult because most dogs aren't used to being walked in the backyard, but rather running free. So this should make for good practice. Once you two can walk in the backyard, move to the front yard. But make sure there are no other dogs walking around while you're out. We're not ready for that just yet, but soon enough, I promise. If multiple people in the home walk the dog or dogs, have them practice the same steps, making sure they understand the importance of loosening the leash after the dog pulls. If you have more than one dog, practice with them separately, as they will likely feed off each other, making training more difficult. Once each dog understands not to pull, you can begin working with them together. Here's an example of the wrong way versus the right way of how to hold your hands when walking. Notice the smooth movement in the leash and how I'm not jerking the dog back. If you find yourself aggressively pulling back on the dog, take a break from training and come back to it. This requires patience and consistency to teach a dog properly, not manhandling and force. You should enjoy training, not resent it. I guarantee if you hate training, your dog will too. Learning anything new is a process and not an event. Keep that in mind, and you two will be just fine.